Let it go. Let it roll right off your shoulder, don't you know? The hardest part is over. Let it in. Let your clarity define you in the end. We will only just remember how it feels. Our lives are made in these small hours, these little wonders, these twists and turns of fate. Time falls away, but these small hours still remain.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to ReelTime for the real everyday movie fan. I'm Ryan Murphy, and it's my great pleasure to be here today with Mr. Steven Anderson, director, storyboard artist for Disney, the House of Mouse itself. Mr. Anderson, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thanks, Ryan. Great to be here.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about you and what you're known for and what you've done. You've worked for Disney for over about 20 years now. I think Tarzan was your first film with them. And you've directed two movies, Meet the Robinsons and Winnie the Pooh, in 2007 and 2011, and you're still working with them today. What can you tell me about, I guess, just start by introducing yourself, your background, and how you got into the industry and what brought you ultimately to work with Disney?
Yeah, well, so my name's Steve Anderson, and I have been in the animation business for, I think it's been 30 plus years. 26 of those was with Disney Animation. Started, I was a CalArts student, as many of you know. Lots of animation people go to this school in Valencia, California, called California Institute of the Arts. And it's great. It's a great art school, but in their film school, they have an animation department that is sort of sponsored and supported by Disney and many other studios in the industry. So lots of Disney folks come from CalArts. So I went there for a couple of years, and then I actually started working at a studio called Hyperion Animation for about 4 years, doing lots of different things, animating, storyboarding, directing some TV there. And then in 1995, I went to Disney, Walt Disney Animation Studios as a story artist on Tarzan. Should I continue?
Oh, that'll bring us up to that. You did work on the Brave Little Toaster at one point, one of the Brave Little Toaster movies. That's always, that was actually a separate company though, and Disney just distributed it. Is that correct? Or
that's correct. Yeah, the first Brave Little Toaster was produced by Hyperion Animation. I didn't work on the first one, but yeah, Disney got the distribution rights for it, and I believe they premiered it on the Disney Channel, I think, or something, and then in Disney Home Video put it out on VHS, and I think they distributed the sequels, but I can't remember if they did or not. But yeah, I did a little bit of storyboarding on those sequels through Hyperion.
Yeah. And so once you got on, I mean, you're credited as co-writing the story for Tarzan. Now you say story artist, and that's what your official credit is on a lot of your other movies. Well, can you tell us exactly what is a story artist? How that works?
Yeah. So the cool thing about being in the story department at Disney Features is that you do storyboarding, of course, panels and shots and all that kind of stuff. But you get to be part of the creation of the stories. You sit in a room with all the other story artists, with writers, with story supervisors, with directors on the particular movie that you're on. And through the course of 1, 2, 3 years, depending on how long you're on the film, you're really there helping to shape the movie as a team. It's very much a hugely collaborative effort to build these stories. So that's what's really, I really loved about working at Feature Animation as a storyboard artist. One of many things I liked about it, but I liked being able to go and storyboard, but also get to suggest ideas for the story, get to sometimes write sequences that might be then polished by writers and things like that. um, really help with brainstorming and shaping the characters in the story. So there's a great sense of ownership in the movies when you're a story artist at a place like Disney Animation, because of that. It's really cool.
And so you work on Tarzan, and obviously, and then after Tarzan, I think it was the next film was The Emperor's New Groove.
Yep.
Was there a certain point, where you were just employed at Disney, like you had your office there or whatever? Has that just basically been constant since 1995 as a story artist for the company in general? Or was it more film to film, being rehired sort of aspect?
You usually are a studio hire at Disney Features. So you go there and you are hired at the studio, and you move from project to project within the building, as long as you're there. So that's what's nice, is that you don't have to go away and then come back for your next movie. You're right there. And there's usually 2 or 3 movies in development in various stages of that development. So by the time you finish on an actual production that's being made, there's another movie that's sort of lining up on the runway behind that one that you jump onto. Or sometimes you might jump onto one that's a little bit earlier, but that you can get into on that ground floor and kind of help shepherd that as well. That you kind of can work on the movies at different stages of development. But I was able to jump right from Tarzan to Emperor's New Groove. At the time, it was called Kingdom of the Sun. It was a totally different movie. I'm sure your viewers probably might know the legend of that movie. But so I was on that for just a short period of time, and then it shifted over to Emperor's New Groove. And then I was sort of fortunate to then get to be a story supervisor on that movie. So I got to advance, one rung up the ladder there. And that was great. So basically, as a story supervisor, you're sort of creatively heading up the story department. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have any more creative weight over somebody than another person. It just sort of means you're kind of the liaison between the story team and the director. So you're that bridge. You get to go to editorial and kind of help with editing and cutting the reels. You have a little more responsibility on the show, which is really cool. The director on that film was Mark Dindal, who's a fantastic guy, just super collaborative, just loves to make animation, but also loves to have a great time doing it. So if you ask anybody that worked on that movie, you'll just get big smiles you'll see big smiles come across people's faces just in remembering what it was like working on it, because we had a real blast making it. So that was fun.
It's a fun film to watch. It's what a lot of people, one of their favorite Disney flicks. So, but then of course you moved on and had more official titles, varying from story artist to story supervisor on films like Atlantis, Lilo and Stitch, Treasure Planet. Working with a lot of great directors. If anyone knows their Disney directors, like you said, you mentioned Mark Dindal, working with Kirk Wise and Gary Truesdale, Ron Clements and John Musker. What was it like collaborating with all those sort of directors? Because then you, of course, next came on to The Princess and the Frog with Clements and Musker. I mean, they're such legends at Disney. But of course, before then, I'm kind of jumping from one question to another here, but also then moving on to get the job to direct your own film, which was Meet the Robinsons. So what can you tell me about that journey from working with all these wonderful directors to getting that gig?
Yeah, it's, because you have so many great talents under one roof at Disney Animation, it's really cool to be able to, collaborate and learn from and brainstorm with all these amazing minds and amazing talents, like those names you mentioned, all those great directors, Ron and John. I mean, such a part of my childhood growing up. So to be able to work with them and kind of get to call them, colleagues and sit in rooms with them, and it's really cool. It's pretty neat. So getting to be director, for me, I had I had expressed interest in directing after Emperor's New Groove was finished, and the studio said, "Great, we love that idea. Let's work on that. Let's talk about what we need to do next. We'd love to have you do another leadership role first before you get into directing." So Brother Bear then was my next project, and I was a story supervisor on that again, like I was on Emperor's New Groove. And then as I was wrapping up Brother Bear, the development folks said, "We have the script for this movie called A Day with Wilbur Robinson. Would you be interested in looking at it and maybe developing this and potentially, there was no guarantee it was going to get made, but would you develop it into through storyboards and through editorial, and then see if we're interested in making it." And thankfully we got a green light, and then that became Meet the Robinsons in 2007.
Yeah. And of course, not only did you direct that movie, but you were also one of the stars in it. You've done a little bit of voice acting here and there, but that's like, you got a big role in that movie. You were the main villain. You were the bowler hat guy.
Bowler hat guy?
Hello, Lewis.
What do you want?
To make your dream come true. All you have to do is put Humpty Dumpty back together again, and we'll take you back to find your mommy.
How on earth did that happen? Because usually I would think that the studios were like, can't we get, like, I don't know, someone like with this, a name to play this main villain role, but we just cast the director. How'd that work out for you?
Well, it's interesting, in animation, because we storyboard the movies quite a few times, we iterate quite a lot in the storyboarding phase. And then we edit the storyboards together, and we actually make kind of like a demo, sort of like a workshop version of the movie that's all storyboards. And then we watch it before we actually produce it in, with animators and lighting and all that kind of stuff. And so to make those workshop reels, we use temp music, we use temp sound effects, and we use temp voices. It's usually way before actors are cast. So a lot of the times it's just ourselves doing the voices of those characters in the building, because it's very rare that you would go pay somebody to come in and do what we call scratch recording. Mm-hmm. So I did the scratch voice for that character, and then it kind of stuck. We did start talking about different casting ideas, other actors and stuff, but ultimately the studio felt that as the movie was developing, that the voice and my voice and the character kind of was a good marriage, and that they thought that was a good thing to go forward with. And that there's precedent for that, because Chris Sanders, who directed Lilo and Stitch, is the voice of Stitch. Mm-hmm. Brad Bird, who directed The Incredibles, is the voice of Edna Mode. Mm-hmm. So that that kind of thing happens from time to time, where a temp voice, a scratch voice is like just kind of becomes attached to the character and kind of becomes the thing.
Yeah. So Meet the Robinsons came out, and then around that time, like I think was when the Disney actually purchased Pixar, and they brought John Lasseter over to become the sort of chief creative officer. And then you sort of entered what fans have called the second Disney Renaissance era, which kind of began with The Princess and the Frog. And you've been there since then, because I think certainly on Wikipedia has you listed under a lot of those films as part of the story trustee, or the story trust.
Story trust,
yeah. What can you tell me about the story trust, and like who else was on it with you, and how you guys all banged out so many of these wonderful films that came out during that era, like The Princess and the Frog or Tangled and all that?
Yeah. So it was the story trust kind of ultimately the story trust, whoever's on the story trust for a particular screening or particular script read or whatever it might be, directors will invite whoever they want really into the room to give feedback, whoever they feel like might have the freshest eyes that can give feedback that is not burdened by having seen so many different iterations, or people that are particularly close to that project or whatever it might be. at the end of the day, you can sort of invite anybody who you want. But the Story Trust, for the most part, are the directors at features. Oftentimes the writers are in there. A lot of times other story supervisors on other movies get invited to those Story Trust meetings. It's really just, at the end of the day, it's really who the filmmakers feel like are going to give them the best feedback, the most creative feedback, the most honest feedback, and that's going to help make their movie better. So as a director, I was in all those meetings for all those different films, to kind of just give honest feedback whenever called upon.
Yeah. I mean, was there after Lasseter came in, was there like a shift in the way that things got done? Because obviously he came from Pixar, and was there any sort of change in the way you did your job throughout the day? Or
I think it was, the biggest thing would be the Story Trust really kind of becoming an established part of the process of every movie. Pixar they have their versions called the Brain Trust. why with different terms, but we do. And they've been doing that since Toy Story, just gathering their creative leadership together to just essentially beat the movies up and say, how can we make these as best as we possibly can? And let's not settle for just good enough. Let's make sure we elevate every idea to the highest, the highest place it can be. So we had kind of casually started something like that at Disney before John came in. But when John came in, he really kind of sort of officially pulled the trigger on that, being a much more kind of structured and reliable part of the process. Like he really implemented it strongly. So that's probably the biggest thing. I mean, there's lots of different smaller things, but that was probably the most impactful part of the overall process of developing the movies that he put in place there at Features, at Disney Features.
And then, of course, I think one of the like the fourth or fifth movie that you did under that was one that you came back to direct, which was Winnie the Pooh, and you co-directed that film with Don Hall, I believe. So what can you tell me about the second time directing, this time with a co-director and taking on such a wildly iconic franchise like that?
Yeah, well, it was great to work with Don because Don and I we were hired we started at the studio like a couple days or maybe a week apart from each other, and we had worked on every project, like every movie we worked on together up until Winnie the Pooh. So it was just sort of a continuation of that relationship, and we get along really well and have very similar tastes and approaches to things. And Don was the story supervisor on Meet the Robinsons, so we'd already kind of worked together in more leadership roles. So it was great to be partnering with Don on Pooh as directors. What was interesting about Winnie the Pooh that was so unusual for the kind of movies that we make at Disney Features is that, typically they're all original stories, they're all original material. So you're starting from the blank page and creating a world, creating a cast of characters, creating it all from nothing. But Winnie the Pooh was interesting because it already existed. The world existed. The 100-acre wood was there. We knew who the characters were. We knew what they sounded like what their voice, how, their speech patterns and their personality clashes between each other. Like we knew all of that. So we could just start working. We didn't have to spend that time of, okay, what is this going to be? We knew what it was going to be. Now it was, how can we find the most entertaining story to tell within that world? So that was cool. It was, again, very different. And we kind of felt like we were somehow getting away with something, because it was like, this is great to be able to just sit down and you can just start drawing or start writing, because the characters are so clear um, we don't have to have years and years of okay, what is this? What is this going to be? What is it going to be?
I think it was also
So that was fun.
the last, if one of the last, if not the last, traditionally animated Disney. I mean, I think it was the last one, right? The traditionally animated
Yeah.
Walt Disney film.
They've done some shorts since then, but in 2D. But yeah, as far as like a feature, which is really, it's kind of strange to think that as of right now, that was the last one.
And you directed.
Hopefully, it won't stand that way. I hope.
Yeah, but it was kind of a historic thing for you to be the director of the final,
I know.
2D animated. So you say you hope it won't stay that way. So I take it you have a particular affinity for hand-drawn animation and that aspect of storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, I have such a nostalgia for that. That's what I grew up with. That's what made me want to draw. That's what made me want to, ultimately make movies. Even is just falling in love with Disney animation, Disney animated features, watching Looney Tunes on TV, just cartoons in general. That was sort of my window into art, into creativity, into storytelling. So I would love to see hand-drawn animation come back. That said, I don't feel like it's better or worse than CG. I think they're both valid ways of making movies. They both have great things about them. They're totally unique to each other. And I want there to be a world where they can coexist and, make sure that, the right story should be told with the right tools, the right way of telling the story. And some stories work great in 2D, some stories work great in CG, and they can coexist. So I hope that it becomes a little more balanced. Right now it's been so CG heavy for many years. It'd be great if there could be a little more balance there.
Sure. And then moving on, I mean, from that, you've done a lot of work. Obviously, go down the list, like Wreck-It Ralph, Frozen. Actually, Winnie the Pooh, I think, was the first Disney film to feature the songwriting duo of Robert Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez, who did a great job on made history with Frozen. I mean, can you remember whose decision it was to bring them on? Did you have anything to do with that as the director to sort of bring them in, or where did they even come from? Because I don't even know what they did before then to get that job.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have amazing music producers at Features. A guy named Tom McDougall, who's there now, and then a man who had retired a few years ago, but was our head of music, named Chris Montan. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning of every movie, they would always sit down with the filmmakers and, together discuss, okay, how is music going to be a part of this movie? Is it just going to be, are we just doing a score? Are we going to have songs? If we have songs, are they going to be more kind of musical like, where characters sing them? Or are they going to be more like, let's say, Tarzan, where you have sort of a musical narrator who's singing over the action? So we knew we really wanted music in Winnie the Pooh. The Sherman Brothers were so, connected to the Winnie the Pooh franchise from Disney, having written the theme song and then all the other songs within those original shorts. And Don and I really like the idea of doing as much music as we can in there. Let's have songs. Let's have sort of proper Disney type, classic Disney song moments in the movie. And so Chris Montan and Tom McDougall would just put together lists of potential composers, songwriters, and through that process, they brought Bobby and Kristen to us. Bobby Lopez had written Avenue Q, which was on Broadway with the puppets.
Sesame Street character, right?
Yeah. And then he was in the process of writing Book of Mormon. It obviously hadn't come out yet, but that was kind of in the works.
Sure.
When he and Kristen came on board Winnie the Pooh, and they just had the work that we'd heard of, the samples that our music guys had pulled. He just really had that warmth and humor. I think that was the biggest thing, is you want to have the heart to it, but we also wanted to make sure that our Winnie the Pooh movie was funny, not just sweet, like play a couple different flavors in there, as opposed to just all sweet. And they did a great job with bringing that to the movie.
And speaking of people who started with Winnie the Pooh in music and then continued a relationship with Disney, was Henry Jackman, who did the score.
Yeah.
And I assume that sort of worked out the same way with the music producers bringing him in. And I mean, he's a phenomenal composer. So
yeah, same thing. They kind of put together like compilation CDs of different composers for the filmmakers, and then you just kind of listen to it and think them through. And then they of course have they can weigh in on how the particular composers work, so that you can find out from a process standpoint, will it be a fit with how we work as filmmakers. And Henry was great, and it was really funny because I think one of his most recent scores when we started Pooh was X-Men First Class.
Yeah.
And so it was funny to think of somebody doing this like really intense action superhero movie doing Winnie the Pooh. But it was actually funny because when we first met because Henry is English.
Mm-hmm.
So when we first met with him, he said, I grew up reading the original Milne books. This is pretty cool for me because Winnie the Pooh is such a part of my childhood growing up over in England. So it was cool also to let him kind of wear a different hat and do something a little more again sweeter and humorous as opposed to action.
Yeah, I think you make a great point with Henry Jackman. Just as a film score nerd myself, like he would vary between working with Disney or DreamWorks and making these animated films, and then going off and making action movies or really raunchy comedies like This Is the End. So I mean, it obviously, like I said, I'm a film score nerd, so I had to bring that up. But as you after Winnie the Pooh and all the years, I mean, it sounds like you just had this really fun job with the Story Trust. Was that just kind of like your 9-to-5, your day in day out job, was just talking about story and spitballing ideas and stuff, or?
It kind of felt more like it was the side job. Mm-hmm. Because everybody's day job was developing their particular movies, and after Winnie the Pooh, I'd been in development, developing an idea there for about 7 or 8 years until I couldn't stand it anymore, and I switched over to TV animation.
Sure.
Where I worked on Monsters at Work that premiered on Disney Plus last summer.
Yeah.
The sequel series of Monsters Inc. But so my day job during those years after Winnie the Pooh was doing research, doing brainstorms with my team at the time, which was I had a story artist, and I had a writer, and I had a development person, and I had a producer, and sitting in the room and kind of trying to hash out a story, writing treatments, doing pitches, all that kind of stuff. And then because there isn't this meeting with the Story Trust to look at someone's screening or someone's script and to give feedback on that, those are milestones in those particular in a project. And so they're like, a screening on a movie is typically every 3 to 4 months. So it's not like every day there would be a screening or a script to read. So that was kind of like, okay, my day job is developing my project with my team, but then on Friday somebody's having a screening. Great, so we meet for a couple hours and we talk about that, and then maybe in a couple more weeks somebody's got a first draft of a script and we read that, and then we meet and we have talk about that, and then on and on like that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. And I was going to mention Disney has been recently under, or the animation department's been recently under with new leadership. Obviously, Lasseter left and Jennifer Lee came in, and I was going to ask about that transition, about what's like with her. But it sounds like you kind of were moving as well at that time into television. So I don't know how much you've really worked with her as the head.
Yeah, it was kind of maybe I'm going to say it was a year-ish, maybe not quite a year. But I worked with Jen while she was a writer, and then directing on Frozen and Frozen 2 as well. So as a Story Trust member, going in for brainstorms or for, to try to get fresh eyes on a outline pitch or something like that. And Jen's really great. She's very kind, very generous, really smart about story. So I always enjoyed getting to sit with her in story rooms and brainstorms and things like that. And I think she's a great leader. So
yeah. So you've transitioned that way. So I take it that's why you're not like you go back to the Wikipedia page. It doesn't have you listed for the most recent 2 animated features, because you've been at work on Monsters at Work and stuff for TV, and you are the chief director of Monsters at Work, I believe. So
I'm one of so I left the company in June, so I'm not working on Monsters anymore.
Oh, I see.
But on season 1, I was one of 2 supervising directors working for a showrunner named Bob Sganaway. Bob's sort of built the whole show. And then Kat Good was the one supervising director, and then myself working under Bob's to then shepherd the episodes through completion. So of the 10, we each took 5. We had an episode director underneath each of us, and then a storyboard team, and then we, oversaw those episodes through the process.
So you said you've actually left Disney now? Is that I hadn't realized that? Yeah. So what are you working on now that you can talk to us about it?
Right now, I think I could talk. I think it's been announced, so I'm going to say that I can talk about it. There's Mark Dindal, who directed Emperor's New Groove, is directing a Garfield movie.
Oh, yes.
Fully
Chris
animated.
Pratt.
Yep.
It has been announced. You're all correct. You didn't just destroy or shoot yourself in the foot or anything like that.
Otherwise, please edit that out.
Yes. And I would have done that for you. But.
I think it's safe. So I've been storyboarding on that and having a blast working on that. It's working with Mark is great. The property is just like a flat out cartoon, so it's so much more broad, and I haven't done anything like that for probably since Emperor's New Groove. It's much more kind of in a Looney Tunes type of humor. Characters can reach behind their back and pull out things they need, as opposed to you can't really do that at Disney. So that's been fun. And then while I'm doing that, I've been just looking for new adventures, new opportunities out there. So that's been fun.
Fantastic. So I guess what I would kind of, was there a thing that brought about the transition from Disney to elsewhere, or is that just sort of something that's not?
No, it was really just a personal decision. I having been there for 26 years, I loved working at Disney. I'm proud of everything I worked on there. Loved all the people. And I just felt like, I felt like it was time to just shake things up and, see if I could find different types of things to work on that would stretch different muscles or develop new muscles that I didn't know I had, or, maybe have been lying dormant for a while. And
Sure.
So it was really it was more of a personal kind of creative desire I had just to make a change.
Yeah. And so what studio is now producing Garfield that you're working with?
Garfield is being produced by a company called Alcon Entertainment.
Okay.
They're a live action studio. They've been around for a long time, done a lot of big live action movies, but this is their I believe it's their first, it'll be their first animated feature.
Okay, so it's all animated. It's not like the Bill Murray
Yep.
movies. Okay.
No, all 100% animated, CG, but yeah, all animated, no live action. Great team, so many fantastic artists. I'm really excited about it. It's going to be fun.
And I didn't realize Mark Dindal was directing that movie, so that does sound exciting.
Yeah.
But as to sort of close this out here, now that we've come up to the present day, if you could, say anything to those who are maybe looking to get into animation, those who are thinking about it as a career path. I mean, what advice would you give, sort of to lead them down that path?
Yeah, I would say from a creative, sort of on a creative artistic standpoint, good, strong communication in your work. Can you communicate ideas, expressions, emotions? It's all about communication, everything we do. So it might be it's one thing to draw well. Obviously, one has to learn how to all the basics of good art skills, but it has to communicate an idea. It has to communicate a feeling, an emotion. So beyond just the art skill, think about communication, think about always telling a story or putting an idea across. And then as more of on a personal note, collaboration is the key to working in animation. I think in this conversation that we've been having, I think it's been pretty clear how much of animation is made by groups of people. It's very rare. The individual tends to make if you're a solo filmmaker, you're usually an independent, and that's great. If you're working in the industry at a studio like Disney or Pixar or DreamWorks, whatever, it's really all about the team. So getting comfortable with collaborating, with showing your work, being confident to be able to say, this is my work, what do you think? Accepting feedback, and then also learning how to give feedback in a constructive and fair way, and supportive way, I think is really important as well.
Fantastic. Well, that looks like it'll do us for today. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Steven Anderson, great animator, great storyteller, has joined us today. What did you think of the interview? Is there anything that that you took from it that you found especially illuminating about the world of animation? Please like, comment, subscribe, and until next time, I'm Ryan Murphy, and thank you for keeping it real with ReelTime.